Score, the podcast. The only show taking you inside the studios of the world's most celebrated composers and musical storytellers.
Kenny Holmes and Robert Kraft checking back in with you another week and another big guest.
Oh boy, do we have a big guest today. Really excited to talk to Kris Bowers, one of my favorite new composers.
He has a big show coming. It actually comes out on Friday. Ava Duvernay's When They See Us on Netflix. And
huge.
There's a lot of buzz coming about it. She's been talking about it a lot. She's really active on social media. But yeah, Kris is going to come on. He was also the composer of Green Book. He's worked with some of the biggest hip-hop moguls on the planet. Kanye West, Q-Tip.
Yeah.
And
Pharrell. He worked with Pharrell. And
Kobe Bryant.
Oh, that's right. He also scores a great series called Dear White People with Justin Simeon directing and writing. And Kris is really on fire.
He's blowing up. So we're going to get to him in just a bit. But we have a couple special guests here as the Blockbuster podcast has now wrapped up. Please welcome back Schrader.
Thank you.
And, of course, Peter. Say your last name for me.
Peter Bovietz.
I always just call you Peter.
Let's go ahead and give him
scared.
It's good that it's Peter.
Welcome.
Thank you.
So, Blockbuster, 6-part series. It's out completely. It's bingeable.
We just wrapped.
It's bingeable. Are you guys, taking a breath now? How are you feeling?
Great. It was a great run, and for those who haven't heard it yet, I'm sure you've been chatting about it. I heard you talking about a couple impressions.
Yeah,
I actually have our first impression of a celebrity that you did very early in the process. We'll play in a little bit, but
Matt, he snuck that up on me. He was like, "Hey, can you do any impressions? Can you do Sylvester Stallone?" And I was like, yeah, maybe a little bit. And he's like, read this and send it to me.
Can you say this phrase?
It ended up in the show, the thing I sent from my iPhone.
I think he knew that you can do those impressions before you knew, because he mentioned that very early on.
I've heard a couple that Kenny said. I didn't know we could do Sylvester Stallone. Here it is. This is just off my phone, but this is how it was recorded, too. So this is the version that I think Peter cleaned up.
Hey, guys. I'm Sylvester Stallone. Reading for the part of Han Solo.
I'm pretty sure I was making breakfast when I did that.
Very impressive.
Thank you. So we put out some we went on social media and asked some of the fans of Blockbuster to ask some questions now that the show is over. And most of the questions, there was probably 50 that people said, what's next? What do you guys do? Is there going to be more? Why is this the last episode? So Matt, what's on the horizon?
I wish
here?
It would have been more appropriate if we had our composers joining us, and they're on opposite ends of the country. So it's a little bit more difficult to do that. But yeah, it was a great run. People really liked the music, which was really cool. People really liked the sound design that Peter just did an amazing job on, and people seem to actually, you know what it was?
It was the actors that did the best.
The actors did pretty well, but I was surprised, I guess, that people are saying that they cried.
There was a lot of those I saw.
Yeah, for a couple moments, and they were moments that I thought were sentimental when we were putting them together,
right.
But that was kind of cool that we're making people cry.
There was a Facebook chat with one of our friends who was recommending it to someone. Turns out he actually was the roommate of our lead actor, and he didn't even recognize him or something like that. And we were talking about it, and I said, you know what? Quoting the podcast, a great story is a great story. And you did it justice with the writing, and the actors did it justice with everything. But it just boiled down to the very basic principle of it really was about the story itself that we were making, and that was it. Everything else kind of came out natural.
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone did it fantastic. I see it from the other view, which is, yes, the story is interesting. That's why we did it. But but all the creative stuff that went into it, Peter and the team just knocked it out of the park.
I'm curious because a lot of people have said, like, oh, this reminds me of listening to radio serials with my dad. But you guys aren't probably even old enough. I know I'm not old enough, and I'm older than you, Matt, to have even listened to a radio serial. So, like, did you go into old radio serials and listen to some of that stuff to get a vibe of that, or was this just...
No, I think we just kind of maybe inadvertently channeled some of that, because really we were saying, let's make a movie and let's do it, and we just won't shoot it. We'll just try to tell the story without any picture, and make something that feels immersive enough so that you kind of forget that you're not seeing anything. And I don't know. I guess it's like reading a book where you kind of start to form the pictures in your head. And even now, I would swear that there are pictures for some of the scenes that we put together. You know, I visualize it. So I think that's cool that maybe we tapped into some of the same thing.
I completely agree. Every episode, I envisioned it as a movie. It's almost like if it were to become a movie, it's already storyboarded in my head, at least. Is there plans for that? I know some people have asked.
Yes. No, there's nothing concrete yet, but that is something that has come up a couple times. We're maybe exploring a little bit, and I think it'd be really cool if something like that came together.
Another question people sent in was, have Stephen, George, and or John Williams heard it that you're aware of? I don't think I've seen anything.
I don't know. I don't know that they would tell us if they had. We'd like to think that they have, and that they love it. I know there've been a number of directors on social media and some producers and other people that have tweeted us and mentioned it, which is pretty cool. So we know that some people are hearing about it, but I don't know about George and Stephen and John just yet.
Well, we just hope they're happy with the way we presented it. We just wanted to give justice to the achievement that they made.
And I'm wondering if you're going to get a tweet at some point from either Spielberg or Lucas saying, I'd like to direct the movie.
Can I direct a movie about myself?
Would it be them, though?
I don't think they even have social media. They're kind of above social media.
I don't think it would be them.
Maybe they'd produce and hire a young, cool director.
Like Ron Howard.
Like Mash Raider.
Or Mash Raider, Raider. Same level.
Peter, there was a question asking about the process. What was your favorite part of sound design that stuck out to you? Like, I can't wait for people to hear this one part.
There's a few of them.
There were a couple that I remember. Every time I would finish, I would get in my car and drive somewhere and kind of listen to that sequence in the car. Just upload it to Dropbox and play it on my phone in the car speakers. I mean, definitely the phone call. Definitely the phone call when they're recording the score in London.
No spoilers if you haven't listened yet, but episode 5.
Yeah, don't tell us what happened with Star Wars.
Jaws.
Was it a success?
No,
they ended up making the music.
There were a bunch of montages that were like, okay, is this working story-wise?
And the car test was a big one, just figuring out how this will play, because a lot of people listen to podcasts in their car, and you can listen to it, playing it on your iPhone speaker, but it's not the same as headphones, and it's not the same as your car, and the car is a good... kind of simulates maybe, for most people, what might be the best place to hear something like this.
We'd love for people to listen to it on the best possible speakers or headphones or whatever, but the reality is a lot of us, even me, listen to podcasts in the car while we drive to work or to meetings or whatever. So
I just realized that we didn't give the proper introduction of Blockbuster. In case this is the first episode you've ever listened to of Score the Podcast and you have no idea what we're talking about, Blockbuster was created by Matt Schrader and sound designed by Peter Bavietz, and it is a 6-part biopic-style podcast about Spielberg, Lucas, and John Williams creating Jaws and Star Wars and everything. Matt, what was your favorite part about the writing? That was another question. Like, what did you have a favorite moment that you pieced together? Well, I know it was based off of fact, but
yeah, I mean the process of the story here was several levels of this. There's the research that goes into this. We wanted to be able to say everything is true and go in saying we aren't making up a story about whatever, somebody being inspired by the ham sandwich that they were eating and this must be a perfect whatever, like we don't need to invent that. This has been documented. in a number of places, and we had to really dig for some of those things to pull out where the origin of certain things came from. But we wanted it to be true. Then we basically created a timeline of where all these things fell into the story in a kind of chronological way. And the last part is kind of the creative side of this, which is we weren't just saying, here's a series of things that happened when they were making something. That's kind of like the documentary approach is, where it ends up, they made it. And then here's, step A, B, C, D, E, and it's just a linear thing. We wanted there to be an arc in this. And so the challenge was in trying to figure out where things kind of the big ideas started to happen, and then where these kind of key relationships form and where these friendships form. And then there's this dark period. It's like a movie where there's always that really dark period, usually 2/3 of the way or 3/4 of the way into the movie. And that was here for this, for at least Star Wars, also Jaws. And then kind of this resolving final act that sets things up for the next couple decades of film. And the way that Stephen and George and John will all work together after that. So that was the part that kind of we needed to figure out how best to tell, where things began and where things ended. So it wasn't just about how they made a movie. This was about a friendship that created the future.
And Peter, you're a sound designer for picture, for films. Did you take a different approach on this? Was it a similar approach? Just... I mean, you're still creating the sound design of what is a picture in our mind, but is there a different approach you have to take when there's no visuals?
I think, first of all, I love documentaries and, score. That was one of my favorite ones that I got to work on.
Mine too.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, me too.
Peter actually designed the sound for score and mixed it with Carrie Barber.
Yeah.
But continue.
Well, yeah, and so documentaries are incredible because we know that we're telling true stories, and somewhere there we get to inject ourselves as creatives, and so the question is, where are we adding to that story? So in a film, it's one thing, and in a podcast, because it was like everything was resting on the shoulders of sound and music. There was no other platform that we would communicate with the audience. We knew that whatever way we're going to inject ourselves, we have to be very cautious because we don't want to change the way people perceive everything. I just love that it was a big shout out to the past almost, because it was like, let's go back in time. How did that world sound? Let's romanticize it. I mean, everything in the work of George Lucas, Steven Spielberg, is a lot about just making, emoting a warm feeling about something, whatever it is. E.T., maybe not Jaws, but it was something about just making the audience feel a warmth to that past, to that story. So
you just reminded me that I wonder, and I don't want to be giving away great ideas to all our listeners without having a conversation, but it'd be interesting what you're describing. First of all, it sounds like you're almost a cinematographer of a podcast. You are literally art directing and filming it in your brain, audio-wise. But it's a shout-out to somebody that deserves more recognition than they've gotten, which is the gentleman Walter Murch, who's the great sound designer of, most notably, Apocalypse Now. But he really leveled this whole playing field up about 4 notches that you're describing.
And if I can, I'm going to make a shout out to anyone who's interested in understanding a bit more about what sound does for film. There's a terrific movie that just premiered in Cannes. It's called Making Waves. And it's directed by a professor of mine back from the days that I studied at USC, Mitch Costin, and a wonderful team of professionals that have really made an incredible movie about what sound is in film. And it just premiered in Cannes. Is it
a doc or
it's
a feature?
It's a documentary. Yeah. It just premiered in Cannes, and so shortly we're hoping we're going to see it.
Hold on, we have some food on the grill here.
That's so nice, and that's a...
Do we need to say Alexa, stop?
That
He did
worked.
it.
No, it didn't
work. Alexa, stop.
I'd like to ask all our listeners what pitch that is. Whoopee.
Oh, my goodness.
We have a guest on the show.
Alexa, stop. This show is so live. You guys
Yeah.
are just, this is a Memorial
It's
Day
raw and
barbecue
real.
situation going on here. And brought to you by Traeger Grills. By the way, my grill that
Nice.
I won that we talked about in the first episode is, it's unbelievable.
But we digress.
I'm so thankful that you're going to give it to me.
I was thinking
That
wait
was a
minute.
generous offer.
Did he
Thanks.
tell you
Thank you.
that too? Because he said to me, I'd really love to show my appreciation. Making Waves
Yeah.
Fascinating.
will come to the U.S. soon.
I want to watch it.
Or yeah. Oh, good. I'd love to see
So
that.
it's basically like how Score approached
Yes.
film music, but it's about sound design.
Exactly.
That
Oh,
sounds
can't wait.
And you have interviews with all the big guys from Ben Burtt's and Spielberg's, Lucas's. I mean, everyone. So
That's
it's,
so great.
It's
Yeah,
definitely
the cast
a
is
movie,
great.
movie
As a sound
worth-
designer, did you leave thinking like, I already knew all this, or did you learn some stuff?
I don't think I know anything yet.
Oh, that's so nice. Beginner's mind, that's called. You remind
He's
me.
so humble.
I always was fascinated by sound designers who would say they had spent the weekend. I used to hear things like this. They spent the weekend in the desert firing guns and recording them to try and get the right sound of a particular period's rifle.
Oh, we were recording Winds last weekend for a movie. So, Winds.
So
Winds.
people had to break
As in
winds
the wind.
near you?
I
No,
don't think it was that.
What is happening? Leave it to Robert.
Right.
Well, thank you guys for coming on and talking about Blockbuster. If you haven't listened
Of
yet,
course.
it's now bingeable. The episodes are like 20 minutes long, so you can knock it out in a car ride home. If you're in LA, probably a drive to work, if you know what I'm talking about.
And it's free and it's ad free.
And it is ad free, which is interesting. My least
new
favorite
model.
My least favorite part about story podcasts that are telling a story is that
The
it gets
interruption.
broken up and just ruins it. It's like if you went to watch Avengers and right in the middle of the movie they were like, "Hey, Casper mattress." Like it doesn't make any sense to break it up like that. So it's a really unique model, and it was all done ad free, but they're definitely looking to repay those costs. So if you want to make a donation, if you like what you heard,
we will accept all of your voluntary donations. Absolutely. So every little bit helps.
and they can go to
GetBlockbuster.com.
getblockbuster.com. Robert, let's jump into a couple of
I
headlines.
thought you were going to at least also say there's a T-shirt because I have my Blockbuster
That's right.
T-shirt.
I've seen you in the T-shirt.
So I was going to say, if you want to not only subscribe, you can wear your Blockbuster T-shirt while listening to Blockbuster.
Yeah.
I
There's,
just want to say,
the
please do it.
hoodies are amazing.
send us a photo and we'll retweet it. Also.
nice.
Robert
They're
has
$19
more
and 77
T-shirts
cents.
than anyone and never wears T-shirts. I just want to make that clear.
I did see the Blockbuster T-shirt though.
I got Blockbuster. I
wore
got a
that a few weeks
Score
ago.
T-shirt.
He put it on for a photo and then hung
Yes.
it back up and went polo and sweater.
Yeah, that's it. That's But there's always kind of you never know. There might be a kind of
Do we have
secret
Blockbuster
T-shirt
mugs?
I think it's only one, but yes.
merch.
They have one. You can borrow it.
Because I love the Score mug. I have 4 of them.
This is really important. We get to the real
Yeah.
meat of the issues here on this show. Don't
That's
we?
a barbecue pun. Okay, this weekend I did go
Nice.
see Aladdin.
I'm sorry for
yeah?
you, or you
I
liked
went,
it.
I went with Matt. It was a little. We went on a little double date
That's
with
sweet.
the ladies.
Very nice.
I think Matt and I might have different takes on Aladdin.
It was fine for what it was.
That's generous.
It was fine. What did you think of A Whole New World? That's that beautiful musical thing right in the middle of it.
I had to pee. All right, I didn't see that part.
Did you bring that little thing that we had for Avengers where it told you where
No,
in the movie?
nobody put out the
No.
where to go to the bathroom for Aladdin article. I'll just say this: if you liked the animated version, which it's my favorite Disney movie, don't be afraid not to go see it. Don't be afraid to see it, I should say, because don't compare it to the animated version, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
It's its own thing, yeah.
Yeah. I thought it was really fun. My biggest fear was Will Smith trying to be Robin Williams, and it ended up being my favorite part of it. So I think he did a really good job. I also wasn't sure how they were going to do the visual effects, and it completely exceeded my expectations. And they hit all of that in the trailer, so I wasn't sure if they were going to be able to pull some of that off. But they're definitely going to be contending for animated visual effects or whatever you call that with everything that the genie was doing. I thought it was really good.
Yeah, just for visually, it was a pretty entertaining movie.
There are things that could have been done better. A lot of the songs were poorly lip synced at times, and I'm sure that just is impossible to do when you're doing action scenes and stuff like that.
Not impossible to do if you have professionals.
If you have time.
Yes, I was going to say impossible to do only
with a deadline. Maybe, I don't know.
I don't know.
It's a question of want.
Yes, it's a question of something that has eternally bothered me and is actually appropriate to the episode coming up, because Kris Bowers had to, it's not lip sync, it's what we like to call play sync, Mahershala Ali playing the piano as Don Shirley. We hopefully will find out from Kris Bowers, did Mahershala Ali learn to play
I'm curious
that amazingly?
Well, I know that he taught him.
He taught him piano.
He's like a piano teacher, literally taught him how to play. So
and for someone who, of course, watches that in the film very carefully, I was stunned by how incredible that aspect of the film was, and it improved the film exponentially for me to see how much care they took in having the fingers match the playing.
Definitely.
And maybe we'll learn how they achieved that.
So overall, Aladdin, it's a kid's movie, George. I'll just put it that way.
Right.
Like Brian De Palma
probably,
says.
yeah.
Right. It's a kid's movie.
I mean, we did go and see it, so.
But I think there's a little nostalgia thing there.
Yeah.
I don't know.
But yeah, it is. It's entertaining.
What's coming out this weekend, Robert?
We have a huge weekend. We can officially say that summer starts this weekend. It's always sort of being backed up by the movie studios because they start it earlier and earlier every year. But I think dropping Godzilla is going to say, we're here. And I think Godzilla is going to be a big, huge vacuum in the marketplace for all those ticket buyers' dollars. But it has some competition. First of all, shout out to Godzilla and our favorite score by Bear McCreary, who kicked off this season of Score the Podcast and is going to get...
The soundtrack's out, too. It's rocking. It's
all
good.
due accolades for the work he did on that. It's going to have some interesting competition from another audience segment in Rocket Man. So I don't know if people will see both, but it might be Godzilla fans are dividing into one line at the box office and going to Godzilla, and then a lot of Elton John fans and biopic fans and music fans going to Rocket Man.
Peter, what do you think about these biopic music movies? Do you think they should have original score? Do you like the way Bohemian Rhapsody didn't have an original score?
Bohemian Rhapsody was amazing.
Moving on.
I mean, it's tough, right? Because you're expecting that all we're going to hear is that original content, that material. So whatever you're going to create, it's going to be very hard to make it stick to that story. So... yeah, I was just Googling. I'm really excited about Godzilla.
Yeah,
the trailer with Claire de Lune, full orchestral for me,
right.
I was like...
A lot of people are. I have a friend who also happens to be my youngest son who bought tickets 2 weeks ago to Thursday night, like 11 p.m. Godzilla. He can't wait to go. There's a couple others in the marketplace that could be interesting. There's a movie called Ma, which is a Blumhouse special, which is going to be a big, horror. Be careful who you ask to buy you alcohol because they might take you home and be weird. But that's the story of Ma, right? Doesn't
pretty
she
much
say you can use my basement? There's, as we said, there's some TV coming up that could be interesting. Certainly at Ava Duvernay's show, and also a new TV series coming up called Good Omens with Michael Sheen and David Tennant, which is scored by our close personal friend David Arnold, who's done a number of James Bond movies.
Usually me.
Yes, and was in our movie Score. You'll
know him from his famous quote, "Usually me."
Right. He talks about the ghosts in Air Lyndhurst. So a lot to see.
A lot. And there's another show Matt told me about, and I went and watched Catch 22, which is...
Oh, yeah.
I've only watched one episode, but it's really, really great.
Yeah, it's really well done, based on the Joseph Heller book, of course, classic story. And
so much to see.
It's really, really well done. And
good.
And scored
emotional
by
in parts.
The Gregson Williams.
Mm-hmm. Which
Bros.
ones? The Bros. They work together.
They work together.
See, you learn something on my own podcast. You get to I get to learn things about scoring movies. That's very nice. I didn't realize that they work together.
Yeah. So lot to look at, lot to look for, a lot to check out, and we want to thank Peter and Matt for joining us. Make sure to listen to Blockbuster.
Yeah.
And tweet
Thanks
them.
for having us.
Tweet them.
Thank you, guys.
Instagram them. Let them know what you think.
At Blockbuster_pod on Twitter, Blockbuster Pod on everything else.
And coming up, we
The
have
meat,
a
the steak.
really great young composer who you're going to hear a lot about, Kris Bowers.
Yep. Stick around.
Steven Spielberg and George Lucas.
What about strange lands and escape from the everyday?
It's brilliant, George.
Before anyone knew them by name.
Who's a good boy, Indiana?
400 grand?
Let me explain it.
George, that's our money.
Blockbuster.
Everybody, take cover!
Following the spectacular failures
Sir, are you all right?
and the unexpected triumphs.
Can you believe it?
I told you, George. I told you.
A 6-part immersive audio series. Blockbuster.
Experience the entire 6-part series ad-free on Apple Podcast, Spotify, and all other platforms.
Hi, this is Justin Hurwitz. You're listening to Score, the podcast. Now let's go back to the show.
Welcome back to Score the Podcast. We are inside Heroes and Misfits Studios. Love that name.
Yeah, I think we're accompanied by a couple heroes and misfits today, too. I'm not sure.
I might be a misfit. I don't
By
know.
the end of the podcast, it will be clear which and who is which one. But
We are joined today by Emmy Award-winning composer Kris Bowers. You know his work from Dear White People, Monsters and Men, and of course the Oscar-winning Best Picture film Green Book. Thanks for joining us today, Kris.
Yeah, thank you guys. Thank you.
so excited to be here with Kris, somebody I've actually wanted to talk to and meet. So excited about the career that we are seeing unfold in real time in front of us, which is this kind of incredible synthesis of someone who certainly has presence in both the film scoring world, of course, but also has worked on records with Kanye and Q-Tip and has performed. Really an incredible hat trick right there of a musician. Kris, I know that you have a wonderful story of going to Juilliard, which, oh, by the way, only the top of the top, and also winning a contest I realized that I've been a huge fan of for years, which is the Thelonious Monk competition.
Yeah.
I love the Monk competition. I always look at the winner. I guess I realized reading some of your backstory that 2011.
Yeah.
That was your
it
year.
a while ago.
And so
For our listeners, can you explain what the
Yeah,
Thelonious
please.
Monk Award is?
Yeah. So the Monk Institute started, I guess now almost 30 years ago, or a little over 30 years ago.
Yeah.
And it started as just a piano competition where every year they invite people from all over the world. You just have to be 30 or under to apply. And they select, I think, 12 semifinalists to come. And then it's a weekend where they have the semifinalists perform. Then they select the 3 finalists. And then that next day, the 3 finalists perform. And then they select the order of the winners for second and third. And now every year it switches instruments. And so there are people like Joshua Redman won one year, or Ambrose Akinmusire, who's an incredible trumpet player, won a few years ago. And they just had it for piano again just last year.
that's right.
Yeah. And when you win, you get a cash prize, but also a record deal with Concord Records.
Wow.
Yeah.
You probably get a lot of clout too in the industry right out of the gate, I would imagine.
Yeah, especially because it's dictated or started, I guess, a lot of careers in the jazz space. There are a lot of people that pay attention to that competition, and that's actually how I met Marcus Miller. They were looking.
I didn't know.
Yeah, they were looking for a pianist for his next tour and his next album, and they were just like, "Oh, who won the Monk competition this year?" And it just happened to be me that year. Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Can we go back to just growing up? You're from Mid-City?
Yeah, from LA. Yeah.
So where did music start for you? Is it a family connection, or did you find it yourself?
It was my parents. They decided before I was born that they wanted me to play piano for some strange reason. They're not musicians at all, and they're like the opposite of most parents.
There's like a grand piano in your crib, in your nursery, or
pretty much. Yeah, they used to find piano sampler CDs they would put on my mom's stomach to play for me and things like that. And they bought me a keyboard when I was really young. They didn't buy me my first piano, I think, until my grandmother actually bought it for me when I was like 10 or 11. But up until then, I was just practicing on a piano or a keyboard. Yeah.
Was it a fun process, or was it a lot of pressure?
You know, it's funny. It felt fun at the time. It's definitely something that, as I look back, I realized how much pressure there was, and I just never really like felt it, I guess. It's funny. I was talking to my parents about how my dad, from the time I was like 6 years old, would find somebody to compare me to and tell me why I wasn't as good as them and why I needed to like, work hard. And so from a very early age, my parents, especially my dad, was pretty tough on me, and I think I just it was just normal. You know, he sat behind me every single day when I practiced from the time I was 6 years old until we got into a fight about it when I was like 14 or 15. And he's not a musician. He used to be a drummer in high school, but that's kind of the extent of his musical knowledge. And but that being said, they did an incredible job of learning with me. Like, my dad didn't really listen to jazz until I started playing jazz, but now he's more of a jazz aficionado than I am sometimes because of how much he listens to it, how much he started studying it. They used to talk to my teachers after every lesson and ask what I should be working on. And so they definitely applied pressure, but did it in a way that made me feel more encouraged than I guess stifled.
Was there a sense that you knew you were great? Like, not to, you know, in a humble way, but like, did you know, like, wow, I'm pretty good at this at a certain point? Not until like I don't know. I think I had moments of like feeling that kind of helped me keep going, but then that moment was quickly shuttered by finding somebody else that was better than me. You know, like, I went to middle school and I was by far the best musician in my middle school because not that many people played music there. And so I felt special, and I like used to play songs for girls and like play at the talent show and like all that kind of stuff. And I went to a very normal middle school. And so it was like what made me feel normal in that space, because I was definitely just a quiet music nerd. But then I was also going to a school called Colburn at the same time, and there was a pianist named Victor Gould, who was a great friend of mine that I always felt was so much better than me from that whole during that whole time period. And then I went to high school, and then immediately was put into an environment full of students and other people that were my age but had been serious about music and jazz music specifically since they were 5-6 years old. And so then I felt even further behind when I got there. And so I think I did have moments of feeling like, oh yeah, I'm pretty good at this, and people were like responding to me. And then I would meet somebody else that was much further along, and I'd be like, oh, maybe I'm not that good. Maybe I have a lot of work to do.
It's so beautiful and so humble to have you feel that and kind of fall back and then leap ahead. I mean, there must have been a minute for either your colleagues or your dad where you could say, I'm doing this thing for Kanye West. I mean, there must have been, or you're with Q-Tip. I mean, there was a whole period where you were being brought in on those dates. Was it through Q-Tip?
Yeah, through Q-Tip. Yeah, I was kind of playing like shows with him and things like that. But he has just a Rolodex of musicians that he would call in for sessions whenever he needed somebody, and it's almost like Q-Tip's studio is a mecca in a sense, where every musician, it seemed, that came through New York would stop by Q-Tip's house. Like, we would, if ever Q-Tip was like, I need you to come over today, I would drop whatever I was doing, because there were times where I would show up and it was Busta Rhymes is here, or Mary J. Blige is here, or like, Pharrell and Kanye are here. And so, it just became a thing where I would just go and play on stuff, and I'd sit with him for a day and play on a bunch of records, and eventually they would end up on some things. I'm on like the very last Tribe Called Quest album because of those sessions, which is pretty
incredible.
Wild. Yeah.
And Q-Tip is acknowledged to be among the great producers in that world, and so being called by him, what a compliment.
Yeah,
you're being kind of knighted in a way.
Yeah, 100%. And his knowledge of music and music history and even just his musicality himself, like the fact that he almost like has incredible relative pitch. He plays a bit of piano, he plays bass, he the first time I met him, he had a that Mark Levine jazz piano book, like sitting up on his piano.
Amazing.
Like, shows how much he's a real student.
It's interesting. It's like Monk. People wondered about, did Monk really understand music because of the way he played? And there's a great story of someone going to Monk's house to interview him, and there was Chopin on the piano. Mm-hmm. And, it's like, wow, what are you doing with that? He said, I'm just learning it. I'm learning, going through it. And wow, Thelonious Monk plays Chopin. You also reminded me of one other thing which Quincy Jones used to say, which is, I asked him, how do you become a great producer? I was working on something, and Q said, you know how you become a great producer? You get a great Rolodex. Huh. And I didn't understand it for years, but he said, if you need a bass part on your record, you don't learn how to play bass. You call Marcus Miller, you call Nathan East, you call Abel Boreal, you just call, and they make your record sound great. It's a great lesson, and Q-Tip clearly showed it, which is, I don't have to learn how to play amazing piano. Yeah. I call Kris Bowers, and I'm done. I was good. Sure. Tell me, it's very curious, because you could have ended up, it would not have been surprising to anybody. Hey, Kris Bowers, isn't he the dude who makes all those hip-hop records and plays synth on hip-hop records? And
right.
He's like that guy. Somehow, you migrated into becoming one of the brightest lights of film scoring in this moment. What was was it simultaneous? Were you film scoring and making records at the same time, pop music and film music? Or was there I got a call this morning that said, could you score a film?
It was pretty simultaneous. I mean, I think it's mainly because it's something that I've wanted to do since I was like 11 years old. Like, I told my parents a very specific plan. My parents made me. I mean, they still try to make me, but they made me come up with plans for my future and things that I wanted to do, and they really applied that pressure pretty early. Like, my parents, my freshman year of high school, were like, where are you going to college? What are you going to major in? Like, what are you like trying to do? And
like backup plans in a sense, or all music related?
Most of it was music related. I think that for them, they at that time were still a little bit nervous about me pursuing a career in music. I think they still felt like it was a thing that I should focus on, but for a long time, it was also the thing that they thought could get me into a good school, and then I could just study something else as a backup. Huh. And then when I started looking at schools, by the time I got to that point, I was just very vehement about the fact that I didn't care about anything else besides music, and I didn't want to go to a regular school. Like, I applied to USC because my parents made me. I didn't really want to go there because I didn't want to have to study anything else besides music, and I knew that if I went to conservatory, I would only be studying music. At Juilliard, we had one liberal arts course a year, and that was like, heaven for me at the time. Like, my senior year of high school, I had finished all the required things to get into especially a conservatory, and so at that point I was like, why am I going to waste my time taking like extra academic classes, even though I wish I had taken other academic classes. But at the time I arranged it so that I had out of my 6-period schedule, 4 of those periods I had practice periods. So I would have like an academic class in the morning, 2 practice periods, lunch, and then arts classes. And so every day I was practicing like 5 hours a day at school, and then would go home and practice more. So I think I was pretty driven to not have a backup plan per se, but my parents, going back to the film scoring thing, they had me figure out exactly what I wanted to do. And so I told them pretty early on I wanted to go to a conservatory. I wanted to then tour with other artists that I admired, then tour with my band, and then transition into film scoring at some point. And
check. Yeah. I'm scared to ask what's next. I mean, astronaut or deep sea diver.
Yeah.
How did you end up in the room with Kanye and Jay-Z on this Watch the Throne album?
Yeah, well, one thing, Jay-Z wasn't actually there. It was just me, Q-Tip, Kanye, and Pharrell actually was there. And that was just because I was doing these sessions with Q-Tip, and we did a show that Kanye was a special guest on, and they just needed somebody to play some keyboard stuff to fix some things on Watch the Throne. And so because I had that relationship with Q-Tip at the time, he asked me to come in and play on some stuff. And so it was one of those like happy accidents to just be in the space and to end up on such a pretty huge album.
What'd you learn in that room? I mean, there's a lot of big name producers that are running this hip hop industry, and you're sitting in the room with these guys. Did you take anything away from being in that room?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, I think the biggest thing was knowing how much or seeing how much they knew about music and the history of it. I think that like for me, I had always, there are things that I just loved because I loved them, but I didn't really study things in the way that maybe I felt I should as I got older. Because I think I when I was younger, was like, oh, I'm pretty good at this, and just kind of like found my way. But I didn't really obsess over things. I didn't obsess over records or obsess over like the details of records until much, much later. And being with those guys and hearing about like them talk about Chicago house music in the 80s and like all these artists that they knew and like records that they knew, and there's all this obscure stuff, or Q-Tip talking about random jazz artists that I had never heard of from the 70s and 80s, and it just really showed that these guys, all they did for, and all they do, but definitely for a period of their life, was just look at albums and just like study that stuff. And so being around that was pretty incredible, and also just seeing how much they were not satisfied with where they were. I mean, you're sitting there talking to three of the guys who were at the top of the music industry in general, but definitely hip hop, and they all were talking about what can we do to be different. Like Kanye was talking about the Beatles concert where they played on the roofs in New York City, and he was like, what's the 2000 at that time, I guess like 2011 version of that? Like, what are we gonna do with my album to make it feel like that event that happened? And he was like trying to brainstorm things like that, which was just interesting to see how much he was trying to push himself even at that point, when he was like, at that point, definitely the biggest hip hop artist out there.
I absolutely love both things you said. I mean, I think it's, as an artist, to hear that, first of all, the education of the artist is paramount. I mean, Monk learning Chopin, it's not to learn Chopin. It's, I want to know more about music. I want to know more about music. To, Pharrell looking at the Let It Be sessions on the roof and the movie, and how does that influence me? But also what you said about they weren't satisfied with where they are, because we all know to be truly creative, you can never rest.
Never satisfied.
And I don't think creative people understand the idea of rest. You're always getting up in the morning saying, this could be better, this could be different, what could I do, what could satisfy the itch that I have? And I think that's amazing to be reminded that the greatest of the greats have that, and aren't at a point where they say, I'm at the top of the mountain, I think I'm just going to chill now.
Well, I think that's why they created a deadline. Because when you're creative, if you don't have a deadline, you're just constantly changing and changing and changing. So you almost you need a stopping point, because never satisfied.
Actually, the deadline is one of the key features between pop music and film music. Because I would work certainly with rock stars who were asked to score films when I was at Fox. People would say, hey, maybe Tom Petty could score this movie, or maybe we'll get the guy from REM to write a score for us. And the answers were always, yeah, that sounds cool. By the way, I'm about to go on tour, so when are you guys thinking about doing this score? And I'd say, when are we thinking about doing this score? You got to start in 8 weeks, and the movie's coming out, and look, there are bus shelters that have big posters on them with the movie already. And they'd say, oh, okay, cool. But then it would get closer to the date, and they'd still be, I don't know, man, we're in rehearsals. And it became really difficult to marry those two worlds, because a record, you can put a record out whenever. And now, of course, even more. You can drop a single, stream it for a couple weeks, drop the next single, be Ariana Grande, and have different tracks come out at different staggered times.
Yeah.
A film score, last time I checked, if you get hired by Justin Simeon or Peter Farrelly to score the film, they don't say, hey, Kris, what schedule are you thinking about for your score?
Yeah, can you squeeze this in after vacation?
And if you have a chance, you wouldn't mind like doing the dates around this time. But if that doesn't work for you, but I never really heard the transition. We ended up in the Watch the Throne conversation, but did someone call you and say, would you score a film? Because you had a whole plan. It's just the question is, how are you going to get to the next step?
Yeah, exactly. So when I was there, when I was at Juilliard, there was a woman that was my manager for about a month. I actually met her because of Aretha Franklin at the Monk competition. Heard me there and asked for my information, and she and I developed a relationship actually after that competition. But one of the first questions I asked her, I was like, I have this record deal now, and I have to consider being a band leader and going on tour, and I think I need a a manager, and so this woman named Tracy Jordan, who was her publicist at the time, and whose mother actually is Sheila Jordan, who's an incredible jazz vocalist.
Yes.
She was like, yeah, why don't you call her? And so she was my manager for literally like 6 months, but she knew a director of a documentary about Elaine Stritch, and that was like the first project that I got.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I know that Elaine Stritch thing. It's about her in Company or in.
It's about her last like one woman show that she was doing.
That's just stunning.
Yeah.
That all comes around. And so they asked you to score some of it?
Yeah, to score the whole thing.
Score it.
And for that one, they wanted specifically a jazz sound. And so I think it worked that I just won this competition. They came to my Juilliard Senior recital to like hear some of my music be performed. And so at that point, they were just excited about that. And then after that, I scored another documentary that same director produced. But then after a while, I didn't really do anything for a couple of years. And it wasn't until a friend of mine, who was a friend of mine from like a high school all-star jazz band, happened to be producing the documentary about Kobe Bryant for Showtime.
Oh yeah,
and
Gotham Chopra's
exactly,
film, right?
Yeah, Muse, and so they asked me to come in for that, and I scored that. And that's what really started to snowball, where I then did a few other documentaries for Showtime. And the head of Showtime, David Nevins, his wife, had a documentary about another football player that I did. And that was really the thing that really started it. And I was actually doing things really simultaneously. I was on tour and scoring these documentaries. I scored probably maybe 3 documentaries while I was also on tour with Marcus.
Did you have a Pro Tools rig in your hotel room so you would come off the road or finish a date and write a cue?
Yeah, I mean, everybody that I toured with would like talk about how I just never slept, because we would come from a show. I would go to my hotel room, and between the 4 hours before we had to get back on the bus, I would be writing cues in my room.
What's the most bizarre place you've written a cue?
In the back of my car. Yeah, yeah, definitely like broken out. In between meetings, I still had some cues to get done, and so I just started writing some stuff in the back of my car.
Hey,
everything's a desk with a laptop.
Yeah.
And listen, that's greatness. It really is. And I remember I think I might be one of the few people who read like an Elvin Jones biography.
Whoa,
Elvin Jones,
that's awesome. Wow.
The drummer in the great Coltrane.
Point that mic up a little more to your face.
Great
there.
Coltrane, McCoy Tyner, Jimmy Garrison quartet. Played my favorite things and made all those great records. And Elvin said they would finish playing 2 or 3 sets at the Vanguard. Mm-hmm. Everybody's packing up and going home, and Train would be in the dressing room practicing scales at 2 a.m. That's why John Coltrane is who he is. He didn't stop. The same thing we just heard about Pharrell and Kanye. He would be in there playing modal scales and playing funny Egyptian scales and whatever it was. And I just love hearing that, because the clock is ticking for all of us. And there's a feeling of like, if you don't do it now, when are you going to learn this stuff?
Yeah.
So hearing that you're in the back of a car writing a cue, that's fantastic.
Probably pretty cool to score a film about Kobe growing up in L.A.
Right on.
Yeah, for sure. I mean,
though he is from Lower Merion.
Yeah,
PA.
that's true. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, disclaimer.
I'm just saying.
But
had to get that in there.
My dad was a huge Laker fan, because my dad grew up here as well, and so I grew up being a Laker fan, and obviously like learned my love for basketball through Kobe's career.
Boom.
Well, and we know that Kobe is now a filmmaker and connected with John Williams. Did you get a chance to meet Kobe?
Oh yeah. We talk all the time, and like we worked pretty closely together on that project.
That's
and
so cool.
Yeah, it's pretty. We just did actually a score for an audiobook series that he just released. I wrote the score to, and we're about to do another one. And he's really since that documentary, he's really made the whole team from that documentary a core team for his studio. Like the guy that was a producer that brought me in, Jake Block, is now pretty much his like right-hand person with all these projects, and he's been having me score everything except for the John Williams short film. But of course, if I'm going to give it up to anybody, it have to be John Williams.
I don't know, Kobe. We got to talk, man. It's me or John Williams. Can I come over and can we have a little conversation like this?
Talk about somebody that has that same never satisfied drive, though. Kobe.
Exactly. I think it reinvigorated that in me. Working with him, because I definitely have always had that, and I think going to college, I got to a point where I realized that I had been working harder than most of the people that I was in school with, And so I got to college and I was like, oh wow, like maybe I should hang out a little bit and chill and like actually have more of a life and like have girlfriends or go out and party and like that kind of stuff. Yeah. And
I do understand why you said when we came in, you're working all the time, because one of the most beautiful things that you're saying is anybody you work for, they want to have you come back and do something else. The greatest gift you can get of doing any project, I always felt, was people like each other at the end and want to work together again. Because, some people work on things, it's like, thanks for playing, see you later.
Yeah.
So they want to bring you back. The hard part is you end up with these wonderful relationships, clearly. And how do you say no? Kobe says, hey, man, what are you doing? Well, if you answered honestly, you're doing 16 things.
Yeah.
But you say, what'd you have in mind?
Yeah. I'm free. Yeah. Whatever you need.
How do you not say that, but you end up, can you clone yourself?
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm trying to figure out.
I mean, it's only you in this room. I must tell our dear listeners, sometimes we go see a composer and there's 62 people outside the door doing stuff. Kris is here by himself, clearly doing everything.
Yeah, I mean, I do have people that help me. I mean, I have 2 assistants now that I just brought on. One is really just admin and stuff like that, and another one started to like help with some of the TV shows and things like that. But yeah, with most of my projects, it's just been so hard to delegate any of that, just because, especially as a player, I think that I just have so strong of a connection to every aspect of the music that's coming out, whether it's the melody or the harmonic progression or whatever is happening, that if for a second I feel like that doesn't feel like me, it's really difficult to let go of that. And I think that that's the thing that I've been trying to figure out in this last like 6-month period, as these things have been coming and more projects have been loading on, is how to delegate, but also probably how to say no more, how to say no to things that maybe aren't that exciting to me, or to check my gut a little bit more. I think because working with some of these people that are return collaborators like Kobe or like Justin, those people, I just love everything that they're doing, and so I want to make sure that I am as free as possible. And I think that this last 6 months, there were projects that I was doing that were some random little thing that I said yes to because I thought it might be a cool thing, or other projects that maybe in my gut I was like, I don't really think this is right, but I decided to do it anyways. And I felt how much of my person was being split, and how much, if Kobe calls me now I'm stressed about whether or not the stuff I'm giving him is as good as it should be because of like some random little like commercial that I said I would score.
Well, and we all know every project starts off as, it's just a little thing, and then it lasts for 6 months, and they're like, hey, can you tweak?
Yeah, exactly.
How many projects did you have? You mentioned you had a lot of stuff going on in like the last 6 months to a year. Can you give us an example of like how many different projects you were juggling?
Yeah, so I just came out of a period where I was working on the audiobook series for Kobe, season 3 of Dear White People, season 2 of For the People, season 1 of Black Monday, a miniseries with Ava Duvernay, a video game, and then some like random little things where I would just like write an arrangement for somebody.
We might want to edit this portion out so every one of those creators doesn't say, hey, wait a minute, Kris, are you giving cool music to Ava when you could have been? I mean, I've been in that situation where it was always very delicate about telling one director that a composer that he has hired, I know for a fact, is doing other things. Of course, composers are incredibly capable of doing that. But you mentioned something else that's really interesting and key, which is the relationships you develop as a composer with a director or a producer. In many ways, and if they're good and productive, that's gold. I mean, I look at Hans with Ridley Scott or Chris Nolan, or Jim Brooks. Those relationships not only sustain his career, but they get better and more developed, and the work gets better. I once had an experience with Danny Elfman and Tim Burton on the bad version of Planet and the Apes. I hesitate to say that because it got better about 4 years later with like Rise of the Apes or whatever that was. It was the one with Marky Mark and some others that Tim directed. They had such an incredible way of speaking to each other that they didn't speak to each other. There was one cue where Danny goes, the band plays and the band plays and the band plays, and it's a fantastic piece of music. And I'm sitting between Danny and Tim at a console. Incredible cue. Just kills it. I kind of look at both of them. Isn't that great? And Danny leans across me and says to Tim, I know, I'll fix it. And I thought, fix what? And Tim didn't say anything.
Huh. Like, are they texting each other?
No, man, they are so locked. They have done so many movies together that something had happened during the queue that Danny knew Tim wouldn't like.
Yeah.
Or didn't want.
Yeah.
Or had said, whatever you do. And they didn't have to say anything. Danny leaned over the orchestrator, changed. But that kind of, look, they just did Dumbo.
Yeah.
You know, that was 20 years ago. So I love hearing that Kobe, Justin, maybe Pete Farrelly. Hey, when we come back, should we take a minute here to
we'll
catch
take
our
a break.
breath? I want to ask you about my good friend Pete Farrelly, who I did
definitely.
lots of movies with.
Yeah, for sure.
Talk about Green Book and how you taught Mahershala Ali how to play the piano.
Yeah.
Much more with Kris Bowers when we return. Stick around. Hey, Score fans, it's Kenny. Now that Season 2 is going strong, you can look good while you're listening. We just released the official Score the Podcast t-shirt. There's multiple colors and sizes for men, women, and children. And they're super soft. I just got a few myself. They fit really nice, and they feel great, and they look cool. So go to score-movie.com/store. Check those out, and you can also get a copy of Score, a film music documentary on Blu-ray, and our interview bonus disc that has the extended interviews from the film. So plenty to check out, score-movie.com/store, and get your shirt today. Welcome back to Heroes and Misfits Studios. I had to tone it down when I came back up with this music.
It's emotional for me to hear this. So beautiful.
The Dear Dolores cue from Green Book. We're here with Kris Bowers. What a movie.
And on Green Book, I mean, all of your skills were employed. And you were not only the composer, which would have been in itself full-time gig. I'm just going to write the music for the Oscar-winning movie of this year. I'm good. How about you're going to go learn all of Don Shirley's piano pieces, transcribe them. I read about it.
Yeah.
And then teach the actor. So you were the music supervisor, the music producer, and the composer. Certainly, I'd like to talk to your manager and your agent, make sure you were compensated fully for each one of those gigs, because they sometimes say, oh, he'll just do everything, man. That's cool. So we can off camera.
Robert Kraft, Esquire.
Yes, we can do that. But what a huge accomplishment, a lifetime accomplishment to do that movie.
Best Picture. What a night.
It's curious. I can tell you, I wanted to ask you about how Pete Farrelly and you were united, because I did many, many Farrelly Brothers movies at Fox.
Wow.
And there was one thing that was consistent about all of them. Something About Mary, Me, Myself, and Irene, Shallow Hal. There was never a composer. Pete Farrelly and Bobby Farrelly did not want composers. They wanted song scores.
For sure.
So we put lots of Steely Dan songs and Phoenix and everybody else. And it was really a great kind of exercise in needle drops. No composer ever. Well, you know, I remember once Pete said, you think you could get John Williams to do this? You know, it was on Shallow Hal or something like that. I think he's doing like Star Wars and then doing Jurassic 3, but maybe in between that. But here, the irony of ironies, Pete Farrelly ends up with a movie that wins the award with a score that's magnificent. How does Pete Farrelly end up with you as the composer of record on the movie he directs solo?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, well, it actually came from the actual music supervisors on the project, Tom Wolfe and Manish Revolve,
who were music supervisors on every single Farrelly Brothers movie.
Yeah, and they're incredible. They
fantastic.
Yeah, they were part. They and my agent were pitching me for it, and you know, they were trying to find somebody that could take on all these roles. And Pete Farrelly, I hope jokingly says that he Googled best pianist in the world, and that's how he found me.
Oh,
and
love that.
That's the best thing ever.
Yeah, it's pretty hilarious. But so that was a big part of the requirement, I think. And so the first time they reached out to me, my first meeting, which I usually go into the first meeting expecting it to be a a moment for them to size me up and see if I'm
of course,
able or capable of doing this project. Especially this is my first studio film, and being responsible for that much is a tall order. And that first meeting, they were kind of just like, yeah, so what do you think about the script? Are you down to do it? Are you available?
What could be better? So you had read the script and you knew about Don Shirley, so you could be.
Yeah, that was
some meetings. You come in and they say, we'd like to tell you about our movie, and you know nothing. This one, they give you a little.
Yeah, they gave me a script,
info.
and but that was my first time reading the script. Was my first time hearing about Don Shirley, and I still actually didn't really know anything about his music. I finished the script right before the meeting, and I went to the meeting and really investigated his music after they had really offered it to me, and that's when that really kind of shattered my world a little bit. Hearing his music and hearing what an amazing and unique talent he was. Yeah.
It's actually interesting because there could be a case made that Don Shirley sat in a place that isn't entirely far from you, playing kind of in the pop world and kind of in the classic world.
Yeah, it's kind of made
also
for you.
Performing as well, so and recording. So there must have been some simpatico feeling of, I'm going to take on this artist. One of the things that's amazing about the movie, and I had to rewatch it, of course, before I saw you, is I am such a stickler for seeing music on camera that looks authentic. There is nothing worse to me than they cut to the drummer and you hear, and the drummer's playing a ride cymbal and a tom-tom, and he's nowhere near in time. And you say, isn't there a music editor anywhere on the planet that can see this the way I can, sitting in an audience?
Yeah.
The incredible granular attention to detail on Mahershala's hands is just did he practice that much? And was the piano, I wondered last night, was the piano silenced? Was the keyboard, you take it so that he's playing the actual piano keyboard, but the strings have either been muffled because he's really digging in.
Yeah.
How?
Yeah. Well, a decent percentage of that is me playing. So
of course it's you playing.
Right,
now that's the thing.
Yeah.
Of course it's your sound. That's why I wondered. He is now. Does he have an earwig in and he's trying to play exactly the thing?
Even the hand. So what they did is they actually did a head replacement. So it's actually my body.
Oh,
and they put,
You just figured something out for me. Thank you, because there's a really slow pan up from the hands.
Yep.
All the way slowly up, and it's him. And I thought,
yes,
most directors would get out of that shot fast before you could figure it out. But they really go with the hands and the body and all that. And then, sometimes I would like a head replacement. I wonder how I can do that.
How did that movie not win Best Visual Effects?
Yeah,
That's a secret visual effect, right?
Yeah, it was
there.
pretty amazing that they did that. There's so many visual effects that aren't even seen that are pretty seamless. But and that was such a big thing for Pete. Like that first shot was that's all he talked about. Even from that first meeting, he was like, I know the first time we see him play, because of that reason, I don't want it to be a cut of the hands and then a cut of the face. It needs to be one fluid shot where we can see that whole
solves
thing.
It. I'll never tell, though we will be on the World Wide Web with this information. However, when you said it was me playing, just out of curiosity, production-wise, is that take actually you playing, or are you playing to playback that moment too?
I'm playing to playback. Yeah. So I recorded all the stuff about 3 weeks before we started shooting.
Sure.
And then we're playing to my re-records. But the as far as how it worked with Mahershala, I spent about 3 months with him, teaching him piano, and at first just the basics of piano, and then teaching him some of the Don Shirley, the simpler moments of the Don Shirley stuff. So there are moments in the film where you see, especially songs like Happy Talk, for example, or the beginning of Blue Skies or something like that. Those are all things that he was able to pick up pretty quickly. And it's really amazing to see that first lesson we did. He spent 3 hours playing a C major scale, and talk about somebody that's focused on trying to get better. Like we were talking about earlier, he's somebody who he would play a scale over and over and over and over again, and I could tell him, oh, let's move on to something else, and he would just keep playing. He wouldn't even hear me. I would have to physically tap him to get him to stop playing. And because he had that much diligence, that by month 3 we were able to start looking at some of the simpler parts of some of the Don Shirley songs and things like that. But with him, it was about even just like the way he sat down at the piano, just like you said, wanting to make sure that people weren't taken out of it because they could see that he was a pianist just by the way he carried himself.
And he had no piano experience whatsoever?
I think he had a little more than he told me. He said he's told me to approach him like he was a beginner, like he had never played before. I know that his character on Luke Cage played a little bit of keyboard, and his wife is an incredible musician. And he had a rap career himself, so I know that he is a musician. But as far as actual piano, he said that he was a complete beginner, and we were starting from the beginning.
Did you know that this was part of the gig when you came on, or did they say, "Hey, by the way, do you want to spend 3 months with one of the stars of the film?"
Yeah, that part I didn't know. They told me that I had to re-record the stuff, but as far as helping rehearsal, I think that was something that organically came where they're like, "Oh, well, I mean, you're playing this stuff, you might as well be the guy that teaches them." And yeah, I was already such a huge fan of his from Moonlight and House of Cards.
It's a hell of a teacher to get.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, I was the one that felt pretty lucky.
Do you think is he sticking with it? Have you talked to him? Like, does he want to play now?
Does he want to jam?
Because he got a pretty good, deep dive into learning how to play.
Yeah, I think he still does actually practice. We haven't talked about it, so I haven't asked him if he's been keeping up with it. But I know that it was something that he really cared about. I mean, whenever we would meet up again, he was just like, "Man, I'm sorry, I've been traveling and I didn't have a chance to like practice this and this, but I practiced this and I'm a little bit better at that." Like, he took it very seriously.
He's apologizing. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like most of my students that I've had in the past didn't even take it that seriously.
Did you do your pre-records on a Steinway?
I did, yes. Yeah, definitely.
I was just thinking that it's such
Steinway
a big part.
Only.
Yeah, it's such a big part of the picture that I thought, man, if you did it on another,
I know, right? And also I'm a Steinway artist, so I
that's fantastic.
Yeah, I myself have the same thing where I have.
Where would you record?
For this one, we actually recorded all of the pre-records at the Bridge, which unfortunately isn't around anymore. But all the pre-records we did there, and then the score we did at Warner Brothers.
Nice. And would the director come to the pre-records or just let you rock away?
He actually didn't. He came to. We did some more pre-records at the Esplanade Studios in New Orleans because that's where they were shooting, and so all the bar scene stuff that happened, like the blues stuff, and then the Chopin and all of that, we did down there. Nice. And I know that Jim Burke and a couple of the other producers and Tom and Manish, the music supervisors, came to that session, but I can't remember if Pete was there or not. I feel like Pete really. I was incredibly surprised with the amount of autonomy and trust that I had on this project.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, it was really special.
I've seen both sides. It makes me wonder whether you get, from the experience of being on the set and being part of it, any interest in making films yourself?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've been interested in that for a while. Like, I was going
to say, you went through all these steps with your parents, the 4-step thing. It ended at film scoring, but I don't know why I have this kind of feeling that it doesn't end there.
Yeah. I have this short film that I've been trying to make for a while that I shot myself. I directed and wrote it, and then ended up with something that showed me I didn't know how to direct and
who'd you get to score it?
Some guy that didn't really know anything about music. But it's something that I'm still working on because the plan is to. As I start to go back into my artist career and release music as a performing artist, having some sort of visual component is incredibly important to me. And so trying to figure out how to rework this short film that I have to fit with music, or to have some sort of maybe different storyline than I had originally planned. But that's something I'm working on at the moment that ties into that. But yeah, doing stuff more on the other side of filmmaking and things in like tech is something else that I'm starting to explore. So yeah, there definitely are a lot of things.
Because you have a lot of free time too.
Exactly, yeah.
Can you tell me and our listeners a little more about what to look forward to in your artist career? Certainly film scoring, there's a full plate, but what's coming up? Records coming out?
Yeah, so I've been working with a lot of different artists, like songwriting, things like that, but I'm working on my own project right now, so probably sometime this year I'll be releasing some new music. And then
are you still on the label that you were on with the Thelonious Monk?
No, actually, no. We've been trying to find another place just that is going to fit a bit more with like the experimental things that we're thinking of doing, because again, a lot of the albums that I want to release, I want to have a very strong visual component and have it be more like a short film that has a score as opposed to an album that I then go out and tour and things like that. But also, I'm working on a project right now with a chef where we're going to do a 12-course meal and have it in a space where we could have for about 20 or 30 people, and on one side have a live chamber ensemble, and on the other side have an open kitchen. And then the idea with that is exploring just multimodal sensory experimentation.
How do I get in on that?
Are you selling tickets now?
That sounds great. You could do that. I'm going to, once a month at some fabulous place in LA, it would sell out instantly.
Yeah, I think it could be a really incredible experience, especially the more I've been researching how much, we talked about synesthesia earlier, but how much people don't even realize how that's just a natural thing that humans have. I mean, when you smell something and you remember your grandma, like that's kind of synesthesia, or if you taste something and feel something. And so I think that it's, I'm just really fascinated by how something can taste slightly different with certain music behind it.
Well, and for listeners that don't, synesthesia, can you explain it?
Yeah, so synesthesia, I guess, is just when you have two senses that are intrinsically tied. So if you see color and hear sound, or vice versa, you hear sound and you see a color, or you taste something and see a color. It's just whenever you have these things that are always tied together. And I feel like a lot of artists probably have I think it's a spectrum, and a lot of artists are somewhere on that spectrum because there's so many artists that are also incredibly visual, or like are incredibly stimulated by touch or something else. And I think that we're also in a place where media is being created that has all these different things that are stimulating you, like something like Sleep No More is a dance, but it's also an immersive theater production. And so I think that
I saw it and it crushed me.
I've never seen it actually.
Incredible.
Yeah,
really incredible. You are living it.
Yeah, and I think that the more that people are experiencing these things, the cooler it is as artists to be able to figure out how to put different disciplines together and see what happens with that.
I just read recently that Lior Cohen, the head of YouTube, said that we used to be in an era of audio for visual, but now we are in an era of visual for audio. In other words, you have music and you're putting the picture is coming on top as a key component.
And look at just podcasting in the short period of time, how much is it's exploded
and immersive,
and people are just headphones in their ears everywhere and on the go, and so it's like there's movies for your ears now instead of just watching it on screens.
You might have explained something to me which I've always discounted. When I was doing music for picture, a lot of directors had no idea how to express something they didn't like. One of my favorites was, particularly as you can imagine why I would find this a favorite, a director said about 1Q, can the composer give it a little more hair? And I thought, and he was looking at me when he said that. I thought, yeah, kind of. But once a director said to me, it needs to be more, I don't know, yellow.
Yeah.
And for maybe he has synesthesia. It never occurred to me till this conversation. I thought, where on the chart do you add, I see rubato, make it more yellow. And of course I would always have to say, let me see what I can do. And I'd walk either onto the stage or pull the composer aside and say, this guy's out of his mind.
That's classic music theory, yellow.
Tell him you're making it more yellow. So a composer would like roll his eyes like, oh man, how do I get out of here? So, I mean, how many thousands of those did we go through? But I'd say, I think you'll like this next one. It's a little more yellow. And play it, and the guy say, yeah, that's it. Whatever it was. But maybe it never occurred to me. He might have been synesthetic.
Yeah.
Is that the word?
Yeah,
I'm going to go with synesthetic.
Yeah, I think
so. Kris, you have a new project releasing this week.
Yeah.
When They See Us.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about how you got on board? How did you get on board with this project with Ava, incredible director?
Yeah.
And this is a very serious, I mean, if you've seen the trailer, this is a very serious subject and a different style of project than you've done in the past.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I got the project really because of a mentor of mine named Jason Moran. And Jason Moran is one of my favorite pianist and an
incredible player.
Yeah, and he has been one of Ava's collaborators for I think since the beginning. He scored Selma, he scored The 13th. He didn't do Wrinkle in Time, but I think that has more to do with the fact that it was a huge studio film than anything else. And so he was originally on this project, and I think just because of his touring schedule, he just couldn't stay on it. And so she asked for recommendations, and he recommended me. In the first meeting we had together, Ava and I, she was still considering other composers, and we just had a conversation about my approach, about why something like this or this subject matter might be something that I'd be interested in working on. And then she showed me the first episode, and then we talked again afterwards. And actually, I got emotional after watching the first episode. I actually went back and as soon as I started talking to her, I found myself like tearing up talking to her about it, just because I felt the story so close to home. I myself actually ended up arrested for protesting and saw firsthand a little bit. I mean, getting arrested for protesting is like a field trip to jail, but they did put us in a cell block, and we were there for 24 hours, and it was such an eye-opening experience. And even going through that with such a silly charge, but watching these young boys get arrested for something, it really reminded me how easily that could have been me, how easily like somebody could have mistaken me for being somewhere I wasn't, and then my whole life would have been completely different. And so that was kind of our first conversation, and I think just a combination of Jason's recommendation and her, of course, hearing my other music in other places, but maybe even specifically how much the show really impacted me from the beginning, I think made it so that she trusted me with it.
What was your experience like working with her?
It was really incredible. I mean, she has a really unique balance of being incredibly tough, but also very giving me a lot of autonomy and freedom as well. Like she isn't very prescriptive when it comes to specifically what she needs from a cue. If there's something I write, a lot of times she's like, yeah, I think it's great. Maybe, this thing I don't really feel as much as I did before, in this moment where his mom hugs him or something like that, and we can amp that up or something like that. But she wouldn't tell me how to do it. She would just be like, yeah, that's something that I used to feel when I watch it so much, and with this cue, I don't feel it so much anymore. So if we can just take a look at that section and then leave it up to me to figure out how to make those adjustments. And the toughest thing was just our schedule. We just didn't really have very much time, and the way she wanted to approach each of these episodes like they were films. And each episode is at least an hour long. The last one's an hour and a half, and each one has about 50 minutes of music. The last one has like almost an hour of music.
Wow.
And so,
what an assignment.
Yeah, it was definitely a lot of pressure, but again, she just was so encouraging throughout all of it that it was
recorded
it was
here in LA.
Yeah, we recorded just a few musicians like in MySpace and things like that, and like layered it on top of a lot of the sounds that we created. Like a lot of the sounds in the score almost sounds more like a horror film than anything.
You know what?
I was going to say that when we heard the cues.
Huh.
I before I knew anything, I heard the music. You shared a little bit of it with us. I didn't know what the subject was because I didn't put together, because I knew Ava was making this.
Yeah.
And I didn't put together that was the
listen
title.
To this.
I thought the title of this is the bad guy creeping up the stairs.
Yeah.
And I thought, is Ava's next picture like in the Jordan Peele zone?
Yeah, yeah.
Kind of.
When they see us?
Yes. Exactly. I mean,
I thought the name of the project was, I just got that, When They See Us, was the Central Park 5.
Yeah.
So I thought, what is When They See Us? Ava's making another thing, and it must be a horror film.
Yeah, no, yeah. When it was first called the Central Park 5, but I think at first, and she speaks to this much better, much more eloquently, but originally I think she wanted to change the title because she felt like that title can't be associated with these boys and these men anymore, because we shouldn't be calling them the Central Park 5, because that alludes to what the crime that they were
erroneously accused of. And so they came up, she and Netflix ended up coming up with this title, When They See Us, and it really is just about when they are in this situation, when these cops or when these
people in authoritative positions see these young black boys. What are they thinking? What comes to mind, or what makes them make these decisions to wrongfully accuse them or to coerce them into giving these statements? And so, as far as it sounding like a horror film, when I first watched it that first time, I felt that way. I felt like
it is a horror film in a certain way. It is a monster of the authorities and a certain approach and assumption, and but they picked the wrong monster, as it turns out.
Well, definitely, and it's really tough to watch, just because you have these boys who ended up being in jail for years and years and got out as men, going in at like 15, 16, 14 years old for one of them, and coming out at 30 years old. Their lives were completely changed, it was pretty.
Well, the trailer is powerful enough, but the series drops this week on Netflix.
Yeah.
Is it sequential, or can you download all 4 at once? Do you know?
You can get all 4 at once.
Netflix doesn't do sequential, I don't think, right?
Yeah,
it's all bingeable.
That's
their thing.
That's their thing. Yeah.
Well, be sure to check that out.
And Ava gets huge props for tackling a number of topics that just need to be done, and I can't wait.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. She basically is just showing how the incarceration system works through the lens of this story, just showing how you can have police that wrongfully convict or coerce somebody, and how difficult it is as a convicted felon to try to assimilate back into the real world, and what the difficulties are there, and then specifically for one boy who ended up going straight to federal prison as a 16-year-old, like what that experience is like for a young man. And so she really is just kind of unearthing the way our prison system works, but through the lens of this story.
I also want to give a shout out, a couple things. First of all, Kris mentioned the way that Ava responded to a cue that she thought could be different or better, and it's what you will pray for as a director, saying, I don't know, I felt something else last time, if you could just fix that, as opposed to, what sound is that?
Yeah.
And is that a what are those instruments called? She let the composer do it, and that's the mark of a great director, I think.
For sure.
Which is when you hire somebody and you let them be a professional in their field. And I've seen a couple do it. Ang Lee, Ridley Scott. They turn to the composer and say, I wish it was a little more this and a little more that. Let's move on. And the composer says, okay, I know how to do that, and let me fix it, but it's not this kind of incredible, I'm going to get in your face about how to do it. The other thing I'd like to do is give a shout out to Kris's parents.
Yeah.
Because clearly they had some instinct about the potential of this unborn human. And clearly here you have to, what's your father did? He's going to learn about jazz, or he's going to learn.
That's incredible.
Put a piano in front of you.
That's really
That's a wonderful story of investment, love, support from a parent. And it's also surprising to me that you didn't rebel. In other words, some kids would say at 14, I'm going to go play ball. I'm going to go into engineering. I don't want to do this. And you stayed true to it, and look what happened. So thank you.
I mean,
Mr.
we've heard
Bowers.
of the headphones on the stomach. But like this goes way beyond that.
Yeah, and I think the fact that I stuck with it has even more to do with them and the way that they did it, for them to have this balance of, again, pressure but support, and the fact that I never felt like they were making me do it. It felt like they were really incredibly supportive and passionate about my passion.
I wonder if when you, God willing, and certainly have a child about to be born, I wonder if you start saying, I want you to learn how to code. Because this will make you the head of Google years from, instead of this world-class composer, which they ended up. If you could learn like coding and search engine optimization right now,
You're like,
I don't know what you would hold up to your stomach, like a laptop, an iPad,
battery cars, Tesla.
Something.
Kris, anything else? I know you mentioned the audiobook coming up with Kobe. Is there a release date on that or anything that you can talk about?
That's actually out. Yeah, it's called the Wizenard series.
Oh, it's out. Okay.
Yeah, that's out. It's narrated by Felicia Rashad. Yeah, and that's pretty exciting. We're doing another one that should come out probably later this year called Legacy, and And then, other than I just did the Madden 2020 video game score, and we're
oh, nice.
Yeah, we actually might be releasing it as a soundtrack, and
wow, that's cool.
Pretty excited about that one too.
Very cool. Well, Kris Bowers, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for coming on the show.
We've learned that if there's a choice, we have a hero here, not a misfit.
I think they're one and the same. Actually,
it might be. Maybe. To be a true hero, you have to understand what it's like to be a misfit, to get the truly heroic status.
For sure, for sure.
Well, again, we want to thank Kris Bowers for coming on the show. Be sure to follow us on Twitter @ScoreThePodcast and subscribe, rate, and review on Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast app. Take it away, Robert.
Hey, man, I'm so excited to be here with Kris. It's really been a treat for me. I look forward to hearing everything, and hopefully, if all of us are lucky, we get a chance to work with Kris in the future. Thanks so much, man, for being here.
No, thank you guys both.
When they see us, May 31st. We'll see you next week.
See you next week.